What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mind Something. If you're new here, my name is Jake, and in today's video, we're going to talk about Hivemapper. Now, I know, you've already heard about it from some other great YouTubers. You've got Geek of All Trades putting out some great content. You've also got Hawk, as well as Rabid Mining, the Hobbyist Miner, and I don't know if you guys caught it, but they were actually on the Paul Barron network not too long ago, and that was a really good interview. But even I put out a video briefly talking about Hivemapper. It's been about 2 months ago, and that was just kind of a bird's eye view of the project and my general thoughts on the matter. Things like tokenomics, the team behind it, and the product itself and the cost. And based on that video that I made, someone from the project actually reached out to me and offered to provide a dash cam in exchange for a documentation of my experience with it. And so that's what we're going to cover today. And believe it or not, I actually went from being very negative about this to actually being kind of excited about it. And I've got some great information to share with you. Now, I'm not going to do it justice like some of these other guys have, but I want to dive into a little bit more of the nuances and the details. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, do me a favor, hit that like, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so by the end of the video. So the first thing that I want to take a look at actually is going to be the team once again. So we've got some heavy hitters here, okay? We've got the co-founder of Solana, the CEO and founder of Helium, the co-founder of Zillow, or former CEO of Zillow, sorry, and the CEO of Masterclass, as well as the CEO and co-founder of Solana. We've got a general partner at Spark Capital, an angel investor and entrepreneur, and former CEO of Tinder, as well as a geotech entrepreneur from Apple Maps executive. So, you know, looking at some of these guys on the roster here, you would think several different things. Now, I know that there is a few of you that probably were not fans of Helium. I actually have a couple of Helium miners that I do plan on converting here in the near future. But, you know, there's a lot of mixed emotions when you bring up some of these names. And for that reason, I was pretty skeptical going into this. But there's been some things that have happened over the course of the last couple of weeks since I've had this that have been kind of eye-opening, and it gives me hope, and I just want to share some of that with you. So, you know, when we talk about profitability, I know most of you guys that are watching this channel are probably GPU miners, and I'm very fortunate that I have solar and I have a very cheap electric rate, and I'm able to continue mining even when most of you are not. But I'm taking a look at profitability based on 13 cents per kilowatt hour, and it does not look good at all. A 4090 right now is making 21 cents a day on RXD. And, you know, if you take a look at like a, let's say a 3070, there we go, negative 1 cent at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, which is, it's really sad. And you know, if you want to continue mining, there are other avenues. You've got things like ASICs, you've got Chia, also got FPGAs and a couple of other options. But what if you compared all of the best miners in their respective categories against something like Hivemapper? Now, I put together a little spreadsheet. Now, this is based strictly off of my experience with Hivemapper so far, which started out really rocky, by the way. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. But, so if we look at an L7 for an ASIC or a C1100 for FPGA, we've got a 4090 for GPU, 7950X for CPU. Also went ahead and threw in the S19 XP Hybrid, as well as the iPolo G1, the Jazzminer X16Q, the Evergreen Chia Miner, and then we've got the Hivemapper. And so we've got revenue, we've got profit, we've got how many watts we're using, we've got the cost of the hardware, we've got our margin of profit compared to how much we're paying for electricity, and we've got the days till return on investment. And, you know, the L7 is probably one of the best miners that you can have currently, and you're looking at an ROI of almost 700 days and a profit, or excuse me, a margin of about 50%. Now, the way I'm getting this margin compared to your electric cost is just simply by taking the revenue divided by the profit. So, for example, a C1100 has a little bit better margin when it comes to how much you're paying for electricity versus the profit that you're getting. And as you can see, GPUs, specifically a 4090, is pretty much dead last. But when it comes to the cost of electricity for the Hivemapper, there is none. I mean, it's just simply riding in your vehicle, working off of your 12-volt battery, which of course is being charged by your engine. But yeah, I mean, you're driving anyway, so I don't associate any price per kilowatt hour with Hivemapper, so +1 there. But even looking at the return on investment, at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, you're looking at basically 2 years for an L7. A 4090 would take you over 14,000 days if you're paying 13 cents per kilowatt hour. And an S19 XP hybrid over 2,200 days. The Antminer X16Q gets a little bit closer at 900 days. But look at this, Hivemapper, you're looking at 318 days based on my specific experience. That's something you got to keep in the back of your mind here. Now, I'm in an area that has the lowest rewards. In other words, there's no extra incentive to be mapping in my area. I'm not in a highly populated area, nor is it very dense with any other miners, and this is subject to change. However, all of these numbers are subject to change, and based on the numbers right now, the Hivemapper is going to give you the fastest return on investment if you have a similar experience to mine. So I thought that was extremely interesting, but I don't want this video to be solely based off of profitability because, no pun intended, your mileage may vary. So what if you're like me and you're very fortunate and you're only paying 4 cents per kilowatt hour? Well, the L7 looks a lot better. You're looking at a 413-day ROI. And for the S19 XP Hybrid, you're at 371 days on your ROI. But it makes no difference what you're paying in electricity cost when it comes to the Hiveminer, still coming in first place here at 318 days until ROI. So you might ask yourself at this point, well, how do I know what my profitability is going to be like and where I'm getting these numbers from? And like I said, this is based strictly off of my experience so far, and it was a very, very rocky start. So I activated the Hivemapper approximately April 10th. And in between April 10th and April 15th, I have earned 3,400 honey token. And I have mapped almost 2,000 kilometers. Now, realistically, my stats should be much, much higher than this. And we had a little problem. So at this point, I'm going to go over some of the negatives that happened in my experience. So shortly after getting the Hivemapper, I actually had a trip planned. Shout out to my friend Adam if you're listening in Colorado. He bought 10 3070 Ti's from me recently, and we decided to meet halfway. And the halfway point for me was about 250 miles away. And I was so excited. I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm about to make so much honey token from this trip. And that's where some of the problems started to emerge. One of the very first things that I noticed, even before taking this trip, was if the app isn't running in the foreground, then it stops mapping. So in other words, you basically have to leave your phone completely uninterrupted while you're mapping. which for me is a big problem because I'm a multitasker. Now, I'm not sending text messages while I'm driving, but I do occasionally pick up the phone to change the song on Pandora or answer a phone call, or perhaps I have pulled over and I'm sending a text message. The moment that I leave the app and go to a different app, within about 30 to 45 seconds, it would stop mapping or it would stop collecting photos. Now, this was super annoying because you don't want to have to mess with your phone while you're driving and going back and forth between this running in the foreground to, let's say, for instance, if you're playing a YouTube video while you're driving and listening to the audio. It was just very cumbersome. And so I immediately took to their Discord and started asking questions. One of my first questions was, why do I have to have a separate piece of hardware? Why didn't they just make this an app that resides on the phone if I have to leave my phone to a point where I can't mess with it at all while I'm trying to map? It might as well just be an app on the phone. Now, that interview from the Paul Barron Network actually answered that question, and that is because sometimes phones' geolocations aren't very accurate, and they need this data to be extremely accurate when it comes to the geolocation. And for that reason, they have several features and pieces of hardware built into this device to make sure that they're getting accurate data when it comes to the actual location of the camera while it's taking a photo. So I can understand why we have to have a separate piece of hardware for that. However, the connection between the dash cam and your phone is through Wi-Fi. And in my particular vehicle, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but my iPhone connects to my radio also through AirPlay, which essentially is using Wi-Fi. And periodically, let's say for example, if I pass a speed trap or some type of radar, it will completely disconnect my Apple AirPlay from my vehicle. And I noticed that I was having the exact same problem with the Hivemapper dashcam communicating with my phone as well. Now, I'm not going to fault Hivemapper for that, but nonetheless, it does cause some issues, and it forces you to have to grab that phone and redo things as you're driving if you're going to try and continue to map. Now, of course, you should pull over, but, obviously you don't want to have to pull over every few minutes if you're passing radar detectors periodically. So this was quite a nuisance. Now, the other thing, and this one is a big, big deal. I was so excited that I had mapped for roughly about 8 hours this day that I was going to get so much honey token. And I watched all of these pictures accumulate in the center of the app. It shows you basically how many photos have gone from the dash cam to your phone. Now on the far right hand side, that's how many photos that have been uploaded from your phone to the network. Now you can choose to do this over cell phone coverage, or you can choose to do it over Wi-Fi. Now in my case, I got to a point where I started allowing it to go over the cellular connection because A, I have unlimited data, and B, I was noticing that sometimes the photos would not upload even when I was connected to my home Wi-Fi. And there are periodic dates in which your photos reset, essentially. So you've basically got 1 full week to gather the photos, and then that day cuts off. They take a snapshot of all those photos, and then a few days later, that's what you're going to get paid for in honey tokens. So I didn't want to take the chance that some of those photos wouldn't get uploaded. So for that reason, I did enable the cellular data upload. Now, that didn't seem to make much of a difference, unfortunately. I experienced something that apparently is not specific to me. Other people have seen this issue. They're currently looking into it. But this is essentially what happened. Even though I disconnected from the dash cam, go into the house, connect to Wi-Fi, launch the app, which, by the way, you have to launch the app and leave it running in the foreground, in order for it to upload photos from the app to their servers. And this process, if you've got, let's say, for instance, 100,000 photos, is not instantaneous. That's a lot of data to transfer to their server. So you basically have to leave your phone unattended. You can't do anything else with it while it's uploading these photos. And I found that to be extremely frustrating. So I'm still excited at this point that I'm going to receive a lot of honey tokens, but what happened was the photos did not upload even though I was on Wi-Fi. At one point, I had over 100,000 photos, and the next time I opened the app, I only had 77,000 photos. So where did those other 25,000 photos go? Just into the ether? I didn't know at that point because I didn't watch the photos upload. I just simply closed the app at some point, and when I reopened it, I noticed the number of photos was much lower. So I was still in anticipation of getting paid a bunch of honey for these 100,000 photos that I had collected. And then the next time I open the app, I see that I only have 55,000 photos remaining, but they are not in the far right-hand column showing uploaded. Only a couple of thousand were, and we hadn't gotten to the point in the week where it is time to reset. So I periodically open the app just to check it and see if it's uploading. And lo and behold, I see thousands of photos just vanishing without going to the uploaded site. And of course, I took to their Discord again. I took a little video of what was going on and shared that with the community. And currently, we are still waiting for a resolution. One of the recommendations was to go into the phone's settings and check the storage and see if the photos were showing up in the photo directory. Unfortunately, on an iPhone, you can't see the photos when you're looking at storage. You can only see the amount of total storage, which I have a ton of photos, so I can't tell if these are photos from the dashcam or if they're photos from my camera roll. So that is a mystery. Now, I didn't want to make a video and just tell you guys how terrible my experience was. And for that reason, I waited this long to make a video until they came up with a solution to some of the problems that I've just illustrated. And they have done so. They just recently announced that a few of us are going to be testing a new firmware release. And it's a pretty big deal. They say many of our devoted early adopters gave us the tough but fair feedback that mapping was not yet the effortless set it and forget it experience the next few million users would expect. We reacted to this feedback with a steady series of firmware and app updates, and the impact is clear. At the beginning of the year, the average map contributor mapped the equivalent of 88.4 kilometers of roads per week. Today, this number is more than 5 times higher at 514 kilometers per week. And I must say that my experience since this new upgrade has actually addressed the major issues and the concerns that I was having. So I'm really glad that I was able to participate in this test for the new firmware, and for multiple reasons. One, because I was really struggling with it, and I think part of that was my lack of research into it, and then also there were some things about the current version of the app that needed to be addressed. And it's really nice to see that they're reaching out to community members like myself to make sure that we have a positive experience with it and constantly improve upon the instructions that they provide, the user interface. And I think they've done a really good job of that compared to some of the other things that we deal with in the GPU mining scene. It's a completely different ballgame. And so for that reason, I really appreciate this. Now, there's some other things that I'd like to get into, though, that I think are very important to go over. So, number one, when it comes to profitability, this isn't something that I should really speculate on how your experience is going to go. or how it's going to go. I can only show you how mine has gone. And if I had those, let's say, 90,000 photos that had disappeared, then if you go back to my little profitability calculator here, this number would be much, much higher. And especially if you're in an area where it's more incentivized to do mapping there. Again, I am in the least sought after area when it comes to mapping, and I'm still doing excellent compared to all of the other mining options that we have currently. And then the other thing is to simply cover what's going on with the tokenomics here. I took a little bit more of a closer look so that I could speak a little bit more intelligently about this, and there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you guys. So the first thing is they say that an average mapper is going to get about 1,200 honey tokens per week currently based on the existing difficulty. Now, the less dense of mappers are in your area, that's probably going to equal less honey for you. So if you can target specific regions that are more desirable, they give some examples. The Netherlands, Portugal, South Korea, all have customer demand. And when I say customer demand, that translates to perhaps real-world customers that are utilizing their service. Now, of course, they won't give us a specific example of who their customers are, but they did point out in that video with Paul Barron that those particular areas have customer demand. So hopefully they do have some customers at this point. And then the other thing that I want to get into with you guys was the market cap, the current supply, the max supply, how many holders there are. So we're looking at basically the equivalent of Etherscan here. This is on Solana's network. Right now it's showing a market cap of $102 million with a current supply of just over 6 billion. Now the total max supply is supposed to be 10 billion. So we're only 4 billion away from reaching max supply. This also shows that there are 14,561 holders, but if you take a look at their Explorer, it shows that there are 14,331 contributors. Now, I assume that that's going to be a mix of people that are solving their AI issues for them, like guessing what's a stop sign and things of that nature. And then, of course, the people that have the actual dash cams. But those two numbers don't match. There's basically a difference of about 200 or 300 holders versus people who are currently mapping. So that number seems kind of low. I'm curious, where are the traders? Is there anybody else that holds the token other than those of us that are mapping it? Now, that could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. It's kind of hard to say at this point. But when it comes to the amount of market cap and the emission rate, I did find some interesting information for you here. So, if we go back to October of 2022, you can see that the total mint was just over 100,000. And then the following month, we're up to 362,000. If we go all the way to the end of this, we show to have minted 41.8 million. And you can see what's going to mapping rewards, what's going to operational rewards, what's getting burned, what's going to pools, and then the total mapping rewards. So this does fluctuate. And, you know, based on what we're looking at right now, the previous month we were at 37.9 million, and we're currently at 41.8 million. So about 5 million is getting distributed per month at the moment. But as you can see, this is subject to change as time goes by. But again, we only have 4 billion left before there's no more being emitted, I suppose. I don't know exactly how that works, but based on what I'm seeing, that's what it appears to be. The other thing that I wanted to give you guys a heads up on is the whales. Let's see if we can find it here. There we go. So if we look at the top 5 addresses, these top 5 addresses make up 98% of the total supply currently. And like, let's take for instance number 6 here. We can see that they're getting pretty consistent transactions, whereas the top 5 wallet addresses do not appear to be mappers. Now, I can't say for certain what those top 5 addresses are, but knowing that the top 5 addresses consist of 98% is a little disconcerting, but perhaps those are the pools that are distributing to the mappers. I'm not real certain about that. Now, based on my experience so far, I could say that I'm pretty satisfied with the reward that I'm getting for mapping. I'm sure that that will go down over time as more mappers join the network. And of course, emission rates have a curve to them, so this will all change. But, you know, if you take a look at the price of it right now, if we zoom all the way out, this chart goes back to December 5th, and it's just been downhill. You know, we've basically in that sideways market with BTC where all of the alts take a hit. I don't know if we're at the bottom and we'll go up from here. Perhaps we've got a lot further to fall. But, you know, if this coin actually does something and there is demand for it and they have customers, then perhaps profitability will look much better than it looks right now. And considering it's still a faster return on investment than any of the other top miners in their respective categories, I think that says a lot. So if you are in fact interested in getting one of these, then I would like to share with you guys a code to get 10% off. So this code is going to get you 10% off if you use the following code, MINESUM, and then apply at checkout. That's going to take you from 445 to 401, which is the reason that I have 401 listed here on the cost of hardware. So an extra 10% off if you use the code MINESUM. And I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor before you go, hit that like and hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one.